What do you think, Mr. Mushahid, is the implication of Arab Spring on South Asia or on Pakistan? As you know, the gap between what the public knows and what the government knows is increasing in Pakistan, particularly as it relates to the events of May 2nd, the Osama operation, and what has transpired ever since.
Well, there's a qualitative difference between the situation in the Arab world and the situation in Pakistan. Pakistan is probably one of the world's most vibrant and dynamic democracies in the Muslim world. It's an open society. Conversely, most of the Arab world has been under suffocation, under repression, under dictatorship. And people couldn't speak out, people couldn't participate in politics. Pakistan, as you know, we have had our struggles for democracy. Even under military rule, there has been a long-standing culture of defiance, culture of resistance, fiercely independent media. I was editor of the Muslim in the days of General Ziaul Haq, one of the most repressive military machines in Pakistan. But still, the press was relatively free to express their views on different issues. So there is a qualitative difference, and you can't compare that. But we are very happy that what is happening in the Arab world is the unraveling of an inequitous status quo, where the gap between the rich and the poor was there. And also, these repressive Arab regimes have held political power either in their clans, their tribes, or their families to the detriment of the majority of their population. And what is significant is that in this scenario, the US has become a power also which is pushing for change, forced by the circumstances and the new ground realities. And it also shows that the clout of the United States of America is being weakened, and the US ability to control and direct events according to their own interests and objectives is now becoming increasingly limited.
Mr. Mushahid, how do you think the tussles of the emerging and declining powers help explain the events in Pakistan? I'm referring to the BRICS nations on one hand and NATO alliance on the other.
I think you have to understand the geopolitical context and the new realities in the world before we come to this issue. The economic and political balance of power is shifting from the West, Europe and US, that is, to the East, to Asia. 21st century, inshallah, will be the Asian century, and China is the rising power. And our region is the strategic center of gravity for a host of issues, where Pakistan's role, Pakistan's position is pivotal. So what we are seeing is that in this changeover, and the US having tried to fight two wars which they have lost, the US is pumping in $4 billion a week in the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, which are unwinnable wars without end. What you are seeing in that context, a vacuum, and the rise of what I call the Muslim middle powers. Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, countries which have been under US patronage, which have been close to the US, now they will be distancing themselves from the US, given the US own weakness and the confusion that we see emanating from Washington, where the military establishment speaks with a different voice than the political establishment. And these middle powers will increasingly play a more autonomous role in their respective regions. The bottom line is that these countries and other countries as well are looking at the region post-US Afghanistan. They now know it's not a question of if, it's a question of when the US and NATO will withdraw militarily from Afghanistan. Not politically or economically, because they have interests, energy and otherwise in the region, Central Asia, Russia, China. But China is the leading power. And I think in India there's a lot of confusion. The Indians have to make up their mind. Will they go with the Asian mainstream, which is led by China, which includes Pakistan, which includes these middle powers? Or will India prefer to be a cat's paw, a front man, if you will, for those sections of the Western establishment who wish to promote India as some sort of a counterweight to rising China? So I see India in two minds, and India has to make up its mind which way it will go, and then India's role would be determined. And also, I think India is also hampered by the fact that they are still in occupying power when it comes to Jammu and Kashmir. Until and unless they resolve their issues with Pakistan and give justice to the Kashmiri people, India's rise will be impeded by these limitations. That's why the Indians tried to get their own person as UN Secretary General, Shashi Tharoor. They failed. That's why India tried to be a permanent member of the UN Security Council. They tried, but they failed. They were blocked. And they will continue to be blocked unless and until they clarify their relationship with their neighbors, the smaller neighbors like Pakistan, have a friction-free relationship, and also when they are clear about their own role in the region, whether they want to be part of rising Asia or part of a new great game, a new Cold War in the region, where they're trying to take on China, which of course is very difficult, but at least some sections are egging them on. Those sections are in Delhi or also in Washington and London. And I think that is the key question which remains to be answered.
So Mushahid, do you think the Islamic world and the US are drifting apart? We have seen the relations between Saudi Arabia and US deteriorate recently. The Iran-US relations have had tensions as well recently because of its nuclear ambitions. And recently US-Pakistan relations have also deteriorated.
I think there's a yawning chasm between the Muslim elite and the Muslim street. And the Muslim elites have used the boogeyman of radical Islam to move closer to Washington, the same way they used to do it in the past under communism. They said, if you're not there, the communists will take over. Now the new bugbear is so-called radical Islam. If you're not there, the radical Islamists will take over. But I think the good thing is that I think people in Washington have seen through that game. And the Muslim regimes are weaker now. And the threat is not from any so-called Islamists. The people of the Muslim world are become more conscious. The social media, internet, television all over, satellite. So people are aware, and there's repression, there's resistance to repression. And I think that is the main change which has taken place. And I feel that President Obama realizes that change, although maybe some others are not aware of that kind of change. And so I feel that the US clout is now weakening, certainly. The US ability to control events. Even Saudi Arabia is trying to carve its own autonomous position. And Turkey has virtually declared UDI. They have created their own position, an own niche. And even Pakistan. Our relations with Karzai, we are moving autonomously on that. Our signing of the Iran pipeline deal, despite US opposition, are moving closer to China on energy and other issues, are reaching out to Central Asia and Russia. All these are indicative of the changes that are taking place. So there are winds of change blowing all across the region, and I feel that that would be the indication of a very positive and more hopeful future for the Asian people.
Mr. Mushahid, we have seen that the nation-state classification and the nations is weakening. If you notice events occurring in the Middle East, Yemen, Syria, Libya, those structures are weakening. Do you think the same is occurring in Pakistan, and what does it mean for the future?
I think the repressive colonial era state structures are weakening. The ability to repress their own people is being weakened. But the societies are dynamic. Look at Pakistan, for example. Pakistan, the state structure which we inherited from British imperialism, that may have weakened. But the society is dynamic. We have, for the first time in our history, a truly independent judiciary, a fiercely independent media, a vibrant civil society, a dynamic NGO culture. And people speak up. They speak truth to power. You had the judiciary movement, which was not led by any political party. It was the people themselves coming out. You are seeing the same phenomena in Iran. We are seeing the same phenomena in the Middle East, in the Arab countries. So societies are dynamic. These are not dead societies. So that gives me hope that the people are taking the destiny in their own hands. And whether it is the hegemony of outside powers, or whether it is the repression of their own regimes. The people are speaking out and the people are resisting. So that gives me hope, but I don't see a change of geographical borders. But I do see a change in the political status quo, which I think is long overdue.
Mr. Mushahid, final question. The tension between US and Pakistan have increased, and most of it seems to be related to the Afghan reconciliation process. In your assessment, where are things heading? Haqqani network is one of the bone of contentions. Pakistan had previously held talks involving Turkey and speaking with Karzai, but it seems like US is also working on a parallel process in which Qatar is more involved and Germany is more involved. How are you assessing the reconciliation process and the future of the reconciliation process?
In Pakistan, we have problems with US policy. Pakistan has paid the highest price in terms of sacrifices, in terms of contribution against terrorism. We are the biggest victims of terrorism. Still, we are being penalized by our friends in Washington. And we feel that on the one hand, the US tells Karzai to talk to the Taliban. On the other hand, the US tells Pakistan to take on the Taliban. So which policy is correct? And in fact, as a student of politics, I was here during the Vietnam War years in Georgetown University. This increasingly reminds me of an action replay of Vietnam, what they're doing in Afghanistan. The drones are a modern version of the Phoenix program, where they were assassinating Viet Cong leaders. They plan to have areas free of the Taliban, strategic areas, villages, like they had in Marja and other places. It reminds me of the strategic hamlets program in Vietnam. And their theory of Al-Qaeda, which is very exaggerated. I always say Al-Qaeda is Al-Faida for the US. It is benefiting. It reminds me of the so-called domino theory, where they say if you don't fight them in Saigon, we'll fight them in San Francisco. So it's shades of Vietnam all over. And I think the US should learn a lesson from history. The Afghans have stood up to the British, to the Russians, to any outside power. And I think even if Pakistan or Iran or any other country tries to dominate them, they'll resist. They are a very proud people with a great and glorious history. So I think the time has come for national reconciliation. The core of that reconciliation has to be a government of national unity in Kabul. And also, the 6 neighbors of Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, China, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan. They have a strategic stake in the stability, in the unity, and the territorial integrity of Afghanistan. They have to be brought on board. And I think we should stop playing games with each other. If anybody in Washington thinks they can bypass Pakistan and try to do a deal over our heads with the Taliban, that will not work. I think we hold the key to future peace, stability and security in Afghanistan. In fact, I'll go to the extent of saying that the political future of President Barack Hussain Obama depends on Pakistan's cooperation in this region. And without Pakistan's cooperation, no peace is possible, no stability in the region is possible. Thank you very much. Thank you.